Welcome to Keep Going, a podcast about failure and success, hosted by John Biggs. Every week, we talk to an amazing person about a time they failed and what they learned. And remember, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Cut myself. Oh well, I don't have to look beautiful. So why don't you say your name and title for me? Welcome back to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. Today on the show we have Christian Gutierrez. Just woke up. Today on the show we have Christian Gutierrez. He's the CEO and co-founder of Passport. Welcome, Christian.
Hey, John. It's great to be with you this morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us about Passport a little bit. I know that you have a background in, I guess they would call it civ tech now, right? Which would be sort of like government tech.
Sure. Yeah. Government tech is squarely where we play. Certainly the lion's share of what we do on a daily basis. A little bit about us. So Passport, we are the most trusted technology partner for curb management solutions. Mm-hmm. We partner with over 800 cities, mostly local, some state governments across North America. And our platform powers things like parking enforcement, mobile payments for parking, digital parking permits, all on a foundation of payments. And we're processing nearly $1 billion a year in payments.
Now, you're certain you want to be describing yourself as somebody who manages parking enforcement. I'm assuming that's also like parking meters and stuff.
Yeah, look,
you make a lot of people sad every day. I just want to tell you.
No, that's not the case. That's not the case. You know, I would say more importantly, we serve the cities whose job is to manage a really tight program. And I think, it's a funny thing because as we built this business, a lot of our focus and a lot of the sort of public excitement was around things like parking apps. People love a good parking app, and that's something we do very well. But as I talk about our business more today in 2025, I'm talking more about the digital infrastructure of what makes these programs run. And a lot of sort of my thought framework and our team's thought framework is really defined by extremes. And so, John, hopefully I can make you feel better if you think about the extreme of no parking enforcement, meaning you can never find a parking space downtown because people just camp their vehicles, right? Good luck running into Chipotle. Not going to happen, right? And so there has to be some sort of turnover on street, and cities try to manage that well. And I would say, of all of the cities and clients we work with, I don't think any of their goals is to write more tickets. What they want to do is manage compliance so that people know and understand the rules and hopefully have better access to the curb.
All right. Well, that sounds nice. When you put it that way, it's a lot better. It's not nice when you get the ticket, but I guess.
Doubt. You fall in line next time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I don't mind paying like a buck to park a mass, like a 2-ton object in a public place. It's kind of ridiculous. It's like to complain about that is actually kind of like infantile.
Fair. Exactly. Yeah. It's not your property.
I mean, like to rent even just this little spot. But then again, we can argue that it's mine, and then we can go down some kind of libertarian rabbit hole, and then
I pay for it with taxes, right? No, it's
we'll all be
I've had
upset.
plenty of fun conversations about this.
All right,
sure.
So I can only imagine that you've dealt with all kinds of setbacks and issues with dealing with this. I mean, the government, big business will move slowly, but I suspect the government moves even more slowly. So tell us some of those issues.
Yeah, fantastic question, John. So I'm deeply passionate about partnering with government. I think that the speed at which the private markets can move, of course, certainly respectfully to our clients, I think they're well aware we can move a lot faster, right? And so I think to the extent that, as you mentioned, taxpayers are expecting a certain type of experience from their government officials, I love the idea that businesses like ours can lean in and help them. I think setbacks have been a dime a dozen. We've been in business for almost 15 years. So we were founded back in 2010. And I think there's probably no version of our story that looks like a straight slope 1 or slope 5 line that gets to where we are today. Certainly ups and downs, right? Raising funds over the last 15 years, both debt and equity. We've raised more than a couple $100 million, deploying the capital in the right way, dealing with a COVID pandemic, right? So the way that our business earns revenue and earns the trust of cities is by aligning our interests with the city. So somebody starts a parking session, somebody buys a digital permit. We get paid when they get paid, right? There's no version of us selling software to a city where they're underwater because they were excited to buy a piece of software and then turns out they didn't need it. That sort of thing. So we align interests well, which is this beautiful value proposition until everybody's locked in their homes and can't park, right? Mm-hmm. But what do we do now? How do we manage this business? Right. The most important thing as a founder and as a founding team for us was to be here for the long haul and to be here for our cities that put their faith in our software. So, we can certainly dig into a few of these stories, but I would say, the thing that I'm most proud of as it relates to our culture is that our team always focuses on what's in their control, breaks problems down to first principles, and is gritty in the way of just dealing with whatever comes at us in service to our customers.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about that. You're dealing with some huge problems, right? So there's lots of data, there's lots of people, there's lots of users, et cetera. What are some of your best practices when you guys build out a product like that? Do you have something that you pull off the shelf and it's ready to go for Scranton as quickly as it is for, I don't know, Cleveland? Or or do you have to do different things for different places?
We have seen at this point almost every iteration of what we expect to see from a city. That's up and down the stack. Tier 1, tier 0 markets like the city of Toronto, the city of Chicago, by incredibly dense and large populations, to very small towns like the one I grew up in Ocala, Florida. So moving up and down the stack, we'd like to think that mostly software is off the shelf. We've built configurations based on all the things we've seen. But I think certainly by the way you phrased the question, John, you and listeners know as well as I do, that there's always kind of one more thing, or, hey, this city is unique because of this thing. And often we find that that's true, and that is the case. And ideally, if we're building the right SaaS platform, which we are, we embrace these sort of curveballs and changes that are requested by cities and build these configurable flags that then we can go deploy in another market somewhere else. I'd like to also just sort of address as we sort of step back and think about our communities, which all look different. We like to think about cities as being in 3 buckets: digitizers, optimizers, and innovators. And none of those are should be taken in any way other than where are they in the product technology adoption lifecycle, right? We love a good digitizer, and it doesn't mean they're behind in 2025. It just means that maybe their population wasn't very densely populated, like they weren't solving for turnover down street. Maybe they didn't have paid parking. Maybe they're still issuing parking citations on paper, and they don't need to have a digital permit. A hang tag suffices, or it has until now, right? And so digitizing an environment is equally as exciting to us as working with a city, like Portland, Oregon, who's pushing the envelope on things like commercial vehicle loading zones and dealing with transportation network companies like Uber or Uber Eats that are pulling up to a curb, flipping their lights on and picking up food for delivery. They're on the far side of the other scale of innovation. All equally fun to work with, very different complex challenges. And we've invested in our platform in a way that we can tackle those and those customers can kind of be on the leading edge of where they are in that life cycle.
What was the situation? Did you ever fall into a situation where you walked into like a city hall and found that it was like 1975 Trapped in Amber or something?
Recently we won a municipality, and I'll spare the name. Let's call them Townsville in Michigan. And we were really excited to work with Townsville. And they had just decided to modernize their program. They bought parking meters. They were adding digital payments, mobile applications, the things that people expect in 2025. And the very next city council meeting, they unanimously voted to kill the idea of paid parking, and that businesses would actually subsidize parking for people downtown, which at face value, I think you read the headline, it's like, man, city council has my back. This is awesome. Parking's free. But kind of like John, you and I were joking about in the beginning, these things have quite negative externalities on the other side. Where there ends up being no turnover, and these things end up hurting businesses in the long run. So from where I'm standing, the idea that a business is now carving out part of their revenue to subsidize parking in a way that's actually hurting them further it's painful for me and our team to see. But the idea is we keep doing, the good positive work in other cities, around them and across the country, and develop the case studies that are compelling enough for a city to make, the alternative decision.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem to have. Like you guys are working specifically in an industry that is, again, we joked, but it's like it's not. First off, it's fairly unsexy. It's not beloved by any stretch. And then, by the whims of somebody who really likes the status quo, you can be sidelined instantly. How do you manage that? How did you route around that damage in Townsville? Or did you?
We could have looked at the contract and said, look, you don't have a termination for convenience. You owe us the money. Too bad, so sad. But that's not a way to play in this space. We say, we get it. Thank you for your initial consideration, and let's keep in touch if anything changes. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you don't make more land, right? The cities that we're serving across North America, there aren't more of them. So the way that you grow in a business like ours is by delivering consistent value over time and earning the trust of those communities and the ones around them. And it turns out that even in the three buckets that I've described, that city was not yet ready to be a digitizer. And that's okay. And that's okay with us. And we certainly wish them well, and we will keep in touch, and maybe something comes around later. It's interesting that, the space that we play in, right? I mentioned this idea of curb management. And it's really the parking industry at large is starting to define any and all work that is related to on-street parking, the thing you're picturing on street, not a gated deck or a surface lot you might park in, near a stadium for an event. I mean, downtown, where the action is 8, 10, 15 cars in one space across 3,000, 30,000, 50,000 spaces on street. That is starting to be defined as curb management. And the interesting thing about this, John, is we've been in this space so long, as mentioned, about 15 years, that we've seen this incredible evolution of those three stages. In that, our initial calling effort, back in 2010, 2011 was, gosh, mobile payments would be a really good idea for you. You're looking to add a credit card option to your parking meter, so you can either spend taxpayer dollars upgrading that parking meter, or you can add a sign or a sticker that says you can pay with an app. And this is back when every single headline was, there's an app for that, there's an app for that, there's an app. So that was the very sexy thing at the time, right? But I empathize and think about our clients then and now, where all of a sudden their business, their remit became a payments business, understanding gateways, understanding merchant processing, managing digital payments. I mean, the idea of I want to accept credit cards is not a conversation that's really happening in 2025. It's an expectation. Of course, you're going to accept credit cards, right? And so there's a level of complexity that has come about with making that experience on the curb that much more seamless. And this arc over the last decade has been really exciting, and really exciting to be at the forefront of across this space.
What should people be thinking about if they have, I don't know, if they have an idea, or if they have a desire to enter into a similar space? God self-government procurement kind of situation where you are dealing with state or local governments. What should be your first step? What did you guys do when you first started out trying to sell this credit card app to these cities?
Understanding the customer problem, understanding what it is they're trying to accomplish. I mean, we think about our business as B2G2C, business to government to consumer. We're building products in an enterprise stack for the city. Also, they can best manage their community constituents, right? And so that's the mentality we take as we build products, and that guide our product development lifecycle. And so the advice I would give for people, I mean, wanting to step into government, I think there's a whole separate playbook, and I'm happy to dig in a little bit. But even just building a business at all is, become intimately familiar with this problem that you're trying to solve. Develop a mindset around customer first, customer centricity, and battle test all of your assumptions. I mean, things can sound really, really good on a whiteboard in a room, in an echo chamber of a lot of people that think like you. But go take those to different size potential prospects and see how the message resonates.
Mm-hmm. How did you start your first cold calling process? It's been a while, so
no,
I don't even remember that.
No, I remember I'm pausing and kind of looking out of my window smiling just because I'm thinking about my co-founder Bob Yoakim, he's our executive chairman, and I just sitting at our desk in a house here in Charlotte, just smiling and dialing. Look, we weren't the first mover in mobile payments for parking. All right, mobile payments for parking had existed in Western Europe, United Kingdom. There were some companies at the time doing interactive voice response, dial in, some touch tone, enter your credit card, that sort of thing. There weren't really apps there. But then there was a first mover that came into our space here. They've subsequently been acquired by a European provider doing a similar service. But we weren't a first mover, but we had a different approach. Let's say this, to keep it really simple, and I think also applicable to other markets. The first mover in this space for mobile payments thought about that end user, end consumer as their customer, the person that's ultimately starting the parking session. And so as they developed their roadmap, they built a really, really cool app and added some different features in the app, like maybe you can get your car washed while your car is parked. Maybe you can reserve for an event in your, what that might be happening in your town. So the mentality they took is let me cater as well as I can to the end user, which is certainly important. The lens that we took was, how can we develop back office systems so that the city can manage the parking apps that are on their streets? And so that took us a whole different way. That took us down the road of, how do they manage rates on street? What's the data they need to see in order to decide whether they have the right rates on street? To your point, John, earlier, like, I don't mind paying $1. I don't mind paying a couple bucks. Seems right. Seems like the right thing to do. Am I getting gouged? Is the city charging me, $8 an hour when it should be charging $6? Maybe they should be charging $12 based on the data. Who knows? So we build systems that allow them to have insights into that type of data. Where are people parking and when? How frequently are they? What are different things you might need to know or understand as to whether somebody has the right to park their vehicle in that place in that time? This massive engine that we call our parking rights and parking compliance database. 1 in 5 people in America have interacted with our products. Okay. And so that's a massive footprint of transactions, of volume, of reach that helps to inform the way that we both develop products and cater to the cities that are using our services. And so I said a lot, but to answer your question, and back to kind of my romantic memory of smiling and dialing, it was, hey, have you heard of mobile payments for parking? Yes, I have. Great. Let me tell you how we think about this a little bit differently than you might have heard. And that message really resonated. I mean, at the end of the day, those folks are the ones that are paying our bills, and we've always geared our engine in that way and still do today.
So what's next for mobile parking? This is I'm sure there's, what do we have, like neuro implants, or what are you guys planning?
Not quite, not quite. I think if we do things right, and as I mentioned, I think the aperture of our business has really grown to this, what feels like an ERP, like an enterprise resource planning system for the curb, for cities. I mentioned this digital infrastructure that allows them to run their program. So through that lens, we think about a future where maybe, and it's wild to say, because I mean, we're doing north of 500,000 transactions a day on mobile apps across North America. But we wonder if there's a future where you don't get out of your car, type in a zone, start a session for an hour and a half. Maybe everything's just tied to your license plate. Maybe it's just tied to your vehicle. And maybe systems that drive compliance, like mobile license plate recognition, fixed cameras on street. And by the way, these aren't like pie in the sky ideas. These are systems that are deployed across our client base. Maybe those are the things that start a parking session or end a parking session. I think we all heard about New York City congestion pricing, which is really on the coattails of a very successful program in the United Kingdom for more than a decade around congestion pricing moving into downtown. I think we see a future where parking starts to look a lot more like transportation, a lot more like tolling. Right, you blow through a red light camera, you're getting a ticket in the mail. You blow through a toll road and don't pay your fee, you get a ticket in the mail. Why are we putting safety at risk of hourly employees that work for a city to go write a citation on somebody's car only to get berated by somebody in the community? Right, like these probably aren't good customer first, customer centric scenarios. And I think that all requires an evolution over the next decade.
Fascinating. All right. Well, so I'll know who to, well, I'll just think of you next time I park. I'm sure I'll see I haven't looked for the logo, but I'm sure I'll see it, right? It'll just be floating around there.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, look, our apps, in more than 800 cities or so are called Passport parking. In very large cities, we will private label our systems. So if you go to Portland, Oregon, our app is called Parking Kitty. Okay. And if your parking session is going to expire, your phone literally meows at you. It's the most Portland thing I could think of. And so you might not recognize us, but there's some single sign on. You'll be pleasantly surprised when you go on the app. Oh, wait a second. Oh, it knows me. That's interesting. Right. And then in some markets, you might not even know we're there because we're supporting back-end digital infrastructure. But I hope that if your parking is seamless, then you think of me.
Right. Perfect.
And think of our company.
And we also know who to blame. We'll just I'll put your email in the show notes.
That's fine. That's
and
fine.
They can come yell at you because they double parked somewhere. All right. Well, thank you for this. This has been really enlightening. I never thought about this topic, and I think it's for folks who are thinking hard about like these big systems. I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's these sort of high volume systems. You brought up sort of security infrastructure architecture earlier. I mean, at our peak, you might imagine when that is, like 6, 7 a.m. people going to work, maybe around lunch hour. The transactions we're processing during our peak are roughly 10 times of the largest publicly traded U.S. financial institutions. Wow. It's heavy loads, that it takes to run these sorts of programs. And I think if we do things right, it is seamless and nobody skips a beat and nobody feels that. But it is exciting. I mean, it's, the market's really changed from kind of a 1 or 0, did I pay or how do I pay, to exploring some of the art of the possible, right? Like how do we drive safety in a bike lane? What partners can we work with to ensure that people aren't parking in a bike lane or throwing up their blinkers in a bike lane that could potentially put somebody at risk?
All right. Well, Christian Gutierrez from Passport, the parking app that you probably don't know you've used, but you probably have. Thank you for joining us. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate your time.
This is Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. Remember, Keep Going is entirely listener supported. If you're listening to this, please head over to keepgoingpod.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast for as little as $5 a month. This is a labor of love, and every little bit helps. Thanks for listening.
I was so lost, pacing back and forth for 20 seconds.